I try to keep my content as apolitical as possible. So going into Barbie, I know that I'm going to be watching a movie that's completely apolitical, where I don't have to worry about that stuff, where I can just talk about the movie, right? Right? What's up, guys? My name's Ken, and I am real crispy enough. So last night I got back from seeing the second half of the Barbieheimer experience, Barbie. It stars the titular character played by Margot Robbie, who suddenly starts to find herself pulled out of her fantasy land by things like thoughts of death, depression, flat feet, and basically just real world stuff. So she makes a journey with Ken to find the human who is playing with her in the real world so she can get her fantasy land back. And as she's journeying through the real world, she discovers the good and the bad of the impact that Barbie has had on women everywhere, and Ken discovers the red pill movement, which is honestly worth watching in and of itself. So this might come as a shock to you. I am not the target demographic of this movie. I know. It's a real surprise. I'm just not. That being said, for somebody who this movie is not really aimed at, I liked it. I had fun. I enjoyed it. It's wacky, bro. This movie is somewhere between a popcorn flick, an acid trip, and a hot summer fever dream, man. It's as crazy as they get, and it's definitely at its best when they're embracing that. So let's start off with talking about the obvious. Margot Robbie as Barbie is great. We all knew she was going to be great, no surprise there. But the MVP of this movie by far is Ryan Gosling as Ken. I'm a huge fan of Ryan Gosling. I love him in most of the roles he's chosen. I think he's got great acting chops. And, we've seen the guy's comedic chops before. We know he has them. But he takes it to another level in this movie. He is hilarious as Ken, and a good deal of the movie's wackiness comes from him. And it's not an easy job he's given as Ken either. He has to play a lot of facets of this character. He's got to play normal, dull Ken. He's got to play like douchey red pill Ken. Then he's got to play liberated Ken. Sometimes he's got to play them all at once. It's not an easy job that he's given, and he goes way harder than he has to in this role. He's phenomenal. The rest of the cast is great too. You can tell these actors are having a ton of fun, and they're a ton of fun to watch whenever they're getting into the antics that define this movie. The craziness is a good deal of what defines the movie, but it's also defined a good deal by its relationship with Barbie, with the toy line. It's not a movie that is made for younger girls playing with Barbie right now. It's meant for people who grew up with Barbie, or at least people who grew up knowing about Barbie. It's sort of like this love letter and this tongue-in-cheek friendly ribbing all in once, because it tackles a lot of what Barbie has done for multiple generations of women. And without giving too much away, it takes a look at like the double-edged sword of Barbie's legacy. I wish I could say that was one of few things that it focuses on. It also talks about the patriarchy. It also talks about feminism. Oh, and it also talks about Barbie coping with her own mortality for a total of 2 sentences, and the second sentence literally goes nowhere. They change the topic after a long awkward silence. That's literally what happens. It also talks about the relationship between corporatism and artistry and how that interplays in the creative process. It also talks a lot about positive masculinity and how toxic masculinity can affect us in ways that we don't really recognize at first. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. This movie, needless to say, tries to cram a lot in there. It tries to cram a lot of characters in there. It tries to cram a lot of things to talk about in there. And when it gets it right, it resonates. One of the human characters has this entire monologue on the contradictions of being a woman in modern society throughout history, and looking at it from a male perspective, it resonates with me. It made me get it. And they also use like all the Kens to take a look into like the male psychology and how it's sort of evolving and changing in the present day. It resonated with me on that. I can confidently say that, looking at this movie and looking at me, I am Knuff, you know? That's what I can say for some of what they try to put in this movie. Most of it, though, it just feels like they are trying to cram so much in there, and a lot of it really doesn't land. For everything that lands, and for every joke that lands, and there are a lot of jokes that land, you've also got a lot that's just nothing. You've got a few jokes that are nothing, but you've also got a lot of themes and messages that this movie is trying to throw at you that it really doesn't stick because they're just trying to throw too much at once. And they do that a lot with the characters too. It feels like they're setting up an arc for certain characters and then they just go nowhere with it. They just sort of bring them along for the ride. And I feel like the main example of this is Will Ferrell's character. And yes, Will Ferrell is in this movie and he's great as he usually is. He's basically the CEO of Mattel and he gets one scene in a boardroom that, you know, it's fine. But then through this very complicated chain of events that honestly really isn't explained well, he ends up having to go to Barbie Land with like all of the corporate suits with him. And it just like, it feels like so many points in the movie they forget that he exists. They forget that they brought him along for the ride and they just sort of like hastily write him in there. And another thing while I'm on Will Ferrell and those guys, like the movie doesn't really seem to know, hey, Koopy, what's up, buddy? The movie doesn't really seem to know where to end the cartoon and begin the real world because, like, you know, for the most part when they're in the real world it feels more like the real world, but whenever Will Ferrell and the corporate suits are on there they just act like cartoon characters and it feels really mismatched and weird. They also kind of have that going with the mother and the daughter, the family who owns Barbie in the first place. Good God, that sounds wrong coming out of my mouth. They have a touching family arc that you really have to wait a bit to get payoff. It pays off in the end, but through that you have to basically go through a lot of the movie putting it on hold and a lot of scenes with the daughter who is just basically your run-the-mill, angry, broody, grumpy teenager. So yeah, enjoy that when you get to the scenes in the real world. But again, for every scene like that, you've also got like every scene where, again, Ken discovering the red pill movement makes every scene in the real world worth it. He feels underappreciated and undervalued by Barbie, and he basically goes through this red pill arc that I don't even want to talk about. Like, you've got to see it for yourself. I think you should see the movie for Ken and his arc alone. It is just, it's perfect. It is so goddamn entertaining. Like, I wish I could talk about it more, but no, you guys, you got to see it for yourself. Ideally on either LSD or shrooms, maybe both, depending on your preference. I don't know. Just a disclaimer, don't actually do that. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Don't. But for all of the stuff that this movie tries to throw in, at the end of the day, it is a fun one. They do go hard. They go all out with the energy. The actors especially, the set designers especially. Oh my God, like the contractors they hired for this movie, I hope they got paid for their time's worth because the set design in this movie unironically fucks. Whenever they are in Barbie Land, it feels alive. It feels lived in. It feels whimsical, but it also feels like its very own world that you could see people inhabiting and interacting with each other in. So I guess I can just wrap up the review on that. Oh yeah, that's right. It's political. Okay, I am really sorry, but I have to talk about this. Oppenheimer spends 75% of its time talking politics, and somehow it's still less political than Barbie. As I was talking about earlier, they try to talk a lot about, again, feminism, the patriarchy, all those issues we are talking about in the present day, and it makes for really good jokes. Is it going to hit or miss with you? I really think it depends on your own personal experience and how well you fit the target demographic for this movie. I'm not in too much of a place to talk about it myself, but I'm already seeing a lot of people saying this movie is anti-male. It hates men with a passion. You're going to go in there and just feel belittled. And I think that if that is the case for you, you might want to take a check at your victim complex or something, because I didn't feel made fun of once. Are there jokes at men's expense in this movie? Plenty. But they're just jokes. Lighten up. And at the end of the day, I think it tries its best to have a positive message for women. Does it have one? I'm not really in a place to say. Is the message positive for men? Hell fucking yeah. I didn't feel like this movie was telling me I was a shitbag because of my genitals. I felt like this movie was telling me you don't need outward validation to be worth something. You are enough on your own. And frankly, I think you're going to have a lot of men also interpreting the message as We can take over the world if we just stop simping. You're gonna have men with that takeaway, trust me. I might talk more about this movie in the future. There's definitely gonna be a lot of conversation around it. I feel like it hasn't ended yet. But just taking it for what it is, I went to this movie to have fun. I had fun. I had laughs. I enjoyed it. Any movie where I can say I enjoyed it has done something right. But Oppenheimer was a lot better. Sorry, it just was. Taking it out of the oven, I'd give it like a nice 77%. You know, I'm not the target demographic. A lot of what they were trying to throw missed with me, but it might be a hit with others. The stuff that hit resonated. I enjoyed it, you know? I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to like, share, subscribe. Come join the Ken Kingdom, the Kendom. We are all enough here. I also have a gaming channel. I have a Twitch. You can find me on the Global Nerds podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Our YouTube presence is going to be beefed up big time very soon. Get ready for that. You can also find links to projects that I'm in, including Power Rangers Unworthy, Power Rangers Digital Beast, Power Rangers Western Strike. I am in a lot of Power Rangers stuff, I know, but it's worth it. I love it. And you can also find a short film that I am in titled One Heart. This has been Krispy, and that's it. The Ken has spoken. Take care, Kens.